Cool. Okay, welcome. Happy Friday. My name is Rachel D'Souza Siebert. I am the founder and chief purpose officer of Gladiator Consulting. I'm very excited to talk to y'all a little bit today about centering values in your entrepreneurial journey. I'm going to share my story of how that has shown up for me. I'm also laughing today because I was worried about being the after lunch slot, but now you're all eating and we'll hopefully save your lunchtime hangover for someone else's session or something else today. And I get to demonstrate my values because I got a call from the school nurse today. So I have a little assistant who now is all of a sudden shy, who had been asking about when she was going to hold the microphone. Want to come say hi? Come on. You want to say hi?
Hi,
And what's your name?
Amelia,
And how old are you?
7.
And what do you think about Mom's work?
I love it.
Okay. Cool. You good? You want to go sit down? All right. So, one of the things that I always like to start with when I'm thinking about my work is this. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether or not I am afraid. I will tell you that when I started this work, I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur, and it's taken me a long time to decide that that word is part of who I am. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story and a little bit of how Gladiator came to be and how our work shows up in the community. And then we will have time for questions. Cool? Awesome. Okay. So my big question, and I want you to think about this during our time together, is what matters to you? Not what matters to your funders, not what matters to your family and friends, not what matters to potential customers and clients. What matters to you? So back in 2011, I was 28. And I was getting ready to start my family. And at that time, I was doing fundraising work for Habitat for Humanity of St. Louis. Just really great organization. Gave me the opportunity to get my feet wet in the nonprofit sector and to learn a little bit about what it means to organize people's passion and resources and time around a cause that they care about. So I was really excited. I felt like I checked all of my late 20s boxes. I had gotten married, we'd bought a house, I had a job that I loved, and I was getting ready to have a baby. And 8 days after my son, Cameron, was born, I had a heart attack. And it was pretty scary. I woke up one morning and my husband wanted to go to the gym. And I said, give me 1 second to brush my teeth. And I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, and I felt like someone had hit me with a baseball bat. And I turned around to see if anything had fallen on me, and there was nothing behind me. And I remember I sat down on the couch, and I put my head between my legs because someone says that if you need to breathe differently or you're in a lot of pain, if you breathe that way, you'll feel better, and I didn't. So I wound up getting rushed to the hospital, and I sat in an emergency room for about 7 hours having a heart attack while doctors asked me if I was anxious or if I'd been doing drugs. And then finally, when my heart went into an irregular rhythm, they realized that something was wrong with my heart. Women of color, take note. People don't believe you in the healthcare system. And actually, women, you're not believed in the healthcare system. So hold on to that for a second. So I went into an emergency surgery where they placed 2 stents in my heart. I spent 3 nights in the cardiac ICU. And then they said, we don't know what to do with you because you're not old and you're not a man and you don't have a family history of heart disease. So congratulations, you get to go home, don't have any more babies. So I went home, and whoever that version of me was on April 13th of 2011, you see me standing here in front of you, but she died. She's gone, she doesn't exist anymore. And the person that was left was a person that had to figure out how to live in this world as a new mom and a heart attack survivor and somebody who realized that the color of her skin was going to predict the way that the world was going to treat her. So we have a choice, right, when bad things happen to us. We can be angry and sad and pissed off, or we can do something with the things that happen to us, and we can use those opportunities to teach and to grow. So I left my job at Habitat for Humanity, and I wound up going to work at St. Louis Language Immersion Schools as their founding director of development. And it's really wild to go from raising money from an internationally recognized organization to a grassroots charter school in a community where charter is a 4-letter word, right? It doesn't matter that they're serving children. It doesn't matter how many children of color or how many low-income children they're serving. Charter is a 4-letter word. So I had to figure out how to organize resources around a really polarized issue when at the end of the day, we just wanted to make sure kids had the opportunity to learn. So I thought I had found the job. I loved it. It was amazing. It was very exciting. Are you influencing me right now? Are you taking pictures of me? Y'all, I'm on video. Okay. So I do this work. I am at St. Louis Language Immersion Schools. 2011 through the summer of 2015. So as we know, in 2014, Michael Brown is murdered in Ferguson, Missouri. And we saw the things that happened there. And a few months later, I am driving home to my house in Shaw. I have just found out that I am pregnant with Amelia. And Von Derek Myers is shot and killed about 2 blocks away from my house. And I had people calling me all evening telling me, go stay somewhere else. Get out of there. That's not safe. This is my community. These are my people. I'm not leaving. I am not leaving. So I went outside knowing that this person was in my belly with my 4-year-old and stood in the streets with my community. And I realized at that point that I had an opportunity to do something different with the life that I had gotten after my heart attack. So, Amelia arrives on May 29th of 2015, and I had imagined all of these really wonderful, exciting ideas that I could do in my role at St. Louis Language Immersion Schools. Oh, you didn't want me to move, did you? Okay, sorry. And about 2 weeks after she's born, my boss is ousted by the board of directors. My partner's company is acquired, and he gets a job that requires him to travel 80% of the time. And I am home on maternity leave with a 4-year-old and a newborn. Do you know what I am not? Is a stay-at-home mom. I tried it. I gave it a good shot because I like doing things that make me uncomfortable. And it was a little too uncomfortable. So I find myself sitting on my couch in July of 2015 with a 4-year-old and a newborn, thinking to myself, if I don't figure out how to use the talents that I have, I'm gonna take these kids down the street to Sasha's on Shaw and maybe drink a little too much. That's really how I was feeling. So I called my brother, and my brother said, why don't you start a business? And I was like, oh no, this is not my jam. I'm not that girl. And he was like, no, really, all you have to do is get a business license and have an idea. And I thought, you know what, fine. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe I should start a business. And maybe I should do some work helping lots of nonprofits instead of one. So he asked me what I wanted to call my business. And at this time, if you all remember the hit TV show Scandal, there's a very amazing character named Olivia Pope. And she called herself a gladiator in a suit because she took people's problems and she solved them. And I have to call out Shonda Rhimes because she is brilliant and amazing. And one of the things that she said that has always stuck with me is that she didn't create her business for anyone else. She created a business that worked for her life. That's what she wanted to do. And I remember thinking, as I started to wrap my head around the idea of consulting, that if I was gonna do my own thing, I didn't want it to work for someone else's life. I wanted to work for my life. So for the first 18 months of having my company, I had a baby with me. And apparently for the next 7 years, I would also have a child with me. I wanted to work with clients who let me be a whole person. I wanted the opportunity to take risks and to learn from them, and to have the opportunity to not get it right, to have the opportunity to fail and to be able to learn from that failure. And if any of you are familiar with the nonprofit sector, we don't get to fail. We don't get to innovate. We don't get to try. You get one grant, you get one shot, and if you don't get it right, you're screwed, right? Like, that's how it works. And I wanted to figure out, how do we do this work differently? And I realized for that to be true, I had to do it in a way that felt good to me, right? Not in the way that fit the sector, not in a way that funders expected me to show up, but in a way that felt right to me. So in 2015, I found this company, and for the first few years, really had worked with a lot of freelance people to get some of the work done. So it was a very organic way in which people who knew me and knew my reputation in the nonprofit sector would reach out for really little projects. The other thing that I realized is that I had a lot of late 20s, early 30s friends who weren't entry level in their jobs, but they weren't ready for a leadership or C-suite position either, or they hadn't been mentored or sponsored to that position, and they couldn't figure out how to get the experience to add to their resume to be able to take that next step. So in the beginning, we were just a bunch of parents trying to figure out how to pad our resume, honestly. And that went on for a couple years, because in the early years I thought, I'm just going to do this until I find the next thing. And one of the things that I realized is that when you look at nonprofits, when you look at the sector, we all have the same problems. It might be different people, it might be a different issue, but we're all mad about our board. We're all worried about mission drift, or that our mission actually doesn't fit what our community needs. We're always fighting for more dollars for our organization and trying to figure out how to get them. And then convincing funders that we can do audacious things with their pennies, and then also not being able to do those things, right? We don't have enough resources to evaluate our work. We don't have enough resources to pay our people a reasonable wage. And then we wonder why we live in a space of harm reduction instead of systems change. It's like every scrappy nonprofit that I know. And so I really wanted to figure out, how do you change the system? How do we stop putting Band-Aids on the environment, or just talking about diapers and period supplies, or just talking about instances of violence, right? Like, how do we look at the system and change the way that we think about our people resources and our money resources? So I started to try to figure that out, and it, surprisingly, when you start to talk about these things, people are inspired but confused about how you monetize it. And what winds up being true is that, at least for me, when I stuck to my values and stuck to the idea that we could try something different and brought people along with us, the resources followed. The people resources and the money resources followed. So from 2019 to 2020, and then from 2020 to 2021, we quadrupled our revenue, we doubled, and then we doubled again, whatever that is. And so then I had to add staff. And for the first 5 years, it had just been me and my scrappy team of contractors. And then in 2021, I wound up hiring 6 full-time people, all also parents, moms actually, to be in this work with me. And what I didn't realize when I had built my business is that I had built something that worked for me. I hadn't really thought about building a thing that worked for people who would believe in my vision or be interested in being a part of this work. And so the next piece of this is that when you bring in staff, you have to think about other people's values too, right? Like, it's not just about you as a founder anymore. It is about creating an environment where everybody sees themselves and can see their work and can see their contribution. So in December 2021, we had a staff retreat, and I have one colleague who has relocated to New Orleans, so I'm not mad that we got to have our staff retreat in New Orleans. And we put together a set of core values for who we are and what this work needs to look like. And these are on our website, gladiatorrds.com. But the things that we named about our work were a focus on social justice and racial equity, a focus on community, a focus on growth, audacity, imagination, and belonging. And we all shared pieces of these words, pieces of these feelings, and as a group, we're able to come together and name these things. But it is not enough, right, to just talk about your values. You have to live them. They have to show up in a meaningful way, which is why I really appreciate the opportunity to have my daughter here with me today, and that you all have been so kind and warm and welcoming. Do you want to go sit back in your chair? The phone's over there. You can go to the phone if you want. No, you're good? Okay. And so one of the ways we tried to figure out how to allow our values to show up in our work was using the Great Mondays framework. Is anybody familiar with that tool? Maybe? No? Not? Okay. So I think his name is Josh Levine, maybe. So pardon me if I got his name wrong. But he has this 6-prong framework to help your organization build and maintain a culture that makes your team excited to come to work. And so it starts with naming a purpose, with using your purpose to define your values, using your values to inform your behaviors, and then really trying to figure out how you know if these things are happening through recognition, rituals, and cues. I will tell you, and this is not like a plug for Great Mondays, but they do have the first 3 chapters of this book free to download on their website. So if you want to dip your toes in the water and see what it's about, you can. And they have some really great exercises that you can use with your teams or within your organizations. But for us, it wasn't just how do we know what's important to us, but how does it show up? So it required us to get really clear about the clients and the causes that we work with. Are we an organization that simply exists to make money and pay ourselves? Are we trying to do something bigger than that? And what had always been important to me is that we're going to shift systems. And if we're going to shift systems, then we have to be really clear about the types of causes, the sizes of the organizations, and if people are ready to talk about things like social justice and racial equity. There are a lot of nonprofits that do a lot of good work that don't care about those 2 things. So if you don't care about those 2 things, you're not our client. And we had to be really transparent with people about our boundaries and about saying no, which you would think might be scary, right? If you're a revenue-driven business, which all of us are. And saying no allowed us to say yes to the right organizations. Saying no to local organizations here in St. Louis allowed us to become a national firm and allow us to serve organizations in Washington, D.C., and Atlanta, and Austin, and Denver, and Seattle. There are a couple of resources that I felt like were really useful on this journey, at least for us. And the 2 that I think were most exciting were, so the Building Movement Project has a framework called the Social Change Ecosystem Map. And this allows you to evaluate yourself, evaluate your organization, evaluate your leadership, and identify sort of what role you serve in a movement for change. And so some people are storytellers, some people are visionaries, some people are disruptors, some people are healers, right? There are a couple different roles in that. The other thing that felt important to me, and this is a wonderful local resource, is Forward Through Ferguson's Advancing Positive Change Toolkit. So this is something that's also free to download on their website. And it is an assessment of where your organization is and how you want to integrate your values, especially values around equity and justice, into your work. So I used these things to figure out how to make sure that our values showed up not just in our client relationships, but in the way that my team relates to each other, the way that we hold each other accountable, the way that we respect each other's boundaries, and the way that we advance our work, ultimately. I also really geek out over Stanford's Social Innovation Review, so if you ever either have a chance to, obviously, read the emails or get the magazine, but go to that conference in Palo Alto is incredible. But there's a lot of things out there, I think, sometimes that compete with each other for our attention when we think about starting a business or investing in ourselves. And that's going to be overwhelming. And the best thing that I can offer is pick the easy thing and start there. Like, pick that place and then start. So I'm not usually like a white lady whisperer, but I really do love Brené Brown, I'm not going to lie. And I appreciate this. Like, when I started my business, I didn't start it to be successful. I didn't think I was going to be successful. I kind of thought I was going to fail. And I also thought that my failure would be mine and I would have an opportunity to learn from trying something that nobody else was willing to try or was going to try. And so I would like to encourage you that if you're starting a business, when you are in your business, that you do the thing that scares you. Because we know what it looks like to not be scared. We generally choose to not be scared every day. And when we do the scary thing or the audacious thing or take the risk, we get to do something amazing, right? We get to do something that we don't know what the outcome looks like that could produce something amazing for our community. So I want to give us a chance to talk because I love sharing with you, but I also want to learn from you, and I want to create the space for us to learn from each other. So I would love to hear a little bit about your work and where you're struggling and what you're curious about, and perhaps crowdsource the wisdom in this room to get us some answers so that we can all give it our best shot. So I'm going to be quiet for a second, and I'm not afraid of silence. So I'll sit here. Oh, look, she's already got her hand up. This is excellent.
So this is one of those scariest things.
Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Sawana Davis.
Hi.
Hi, and my background is business and IT, but I also extended it and got adult education teacher certification. So I was in the sector of Job Corps. My students were 16 to 24-year-olds.
Okay.
And I stepped into that arena outside of IT, like, okay, let's give it a whirl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point, it got boring to me because I got tired of putting the students on the computer and giving them worksheets. Some got to give else I'm going back into IT.
Mm-hmm.
So I was at Walmart, bought a bead kit, took it to class, like, let's make keychains. It's Free Friday. So I had to do that for 2 weeks because I had separate students.
Sure.
And they said, Ms. Day, we tired of making cat, dogs, and rabbits. I said, well, let's look and see what else we can find. So
Yeah.
we found other designs. I bought more materials, more supplies. And I'm sitting at my desk, and I made a cat in a hat. And God spoke to me. He said, do math from that keychain. So I picked up a pencil, and I started solving. I started making expressions, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, now, this is not boring. This piece not. So my 7-year-old son, 6 at the time, came into my classroom. So all these keychains, say, Mom, I want to make keychains. I said, well, it's not just keychains, it's math related. Well, how are you going to do math with Cat in the Hat? So I took them to the board and I showed them how you group colors, how you identify what is a fraction, the total, and convert from fractions, decimal percents, measurements, and geometry, the whole 9 yards. So he said, well, I still want to make keychains. I was like, okay, well, Mama, can you buy me a Blade? Can we get a Hot Wheel? I was like, no. How about you sell these keychains? See if you can make some money, and there you go. So his first weekend, he made over $200 selling keychains and talking about math principles that you can use to solve these equations off of these designs. So a year later, he turned my project into his STEM business. At 7. He's 18 now. He's a freshman in college, so now Mama has the STEM program. All on me, all the hats and everything. So I'm at this point like, okay, I need to do some digital stuff. I need to make it a little bit more easy because I can't be here, there, and everywhere.
Sure.
And we also converted English into Spanish. And that's where I'm at right now. So I'm like wearing all the hats, and
Yeah.
he's away at school.
What do you enjoy, though, about it?
I enjoy working with the kids, showing them how they can integrate math with art,
Okay.
and that they can grasp the concept and tie it in with what the teacher is teaching them in class. More class participation. They'll get reconnected,
Yeah.
love the passion of math, and every kid has a right to be a fluent thinker. So we don't want to leave no kid behind.
Right.
That's why we created in the way that we did. And even though it started out like intermediate, I have to go back and do the book. I'll do the second book because I helped him write the first book. The second book will be for first grade through fourth, and then the third book is going to be all about algebra because I found out that I can do algebra expressions through art and keychain designs. So that's where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. What's the hard part? What feels hard?
Wearing all the hats and trying to prioritize and say what needs to be done first, second, and third so it can scale and move and
What are you going to say no to?
nothing.
That's the wrong answer. What are you going to say no to?
I don't know. I know I say no to friends and families at times, and I say I'm going on sabbatical, so don't call me, you know, for this length of time.
Maybe no's not the right answer. What are you going to say not now to?
The things that I want to do later on.
Okay.
And focus on what's now
Okay.
that needs to be done.
Okay. Any questions for her?
Yes.
So the things that you are doing, have you considered writing out your job description to yourself for each thing? And so like, for instance, your social media, write out your job description for your social media and then find an intern to do that job. Or like hire somebody to do that job for each thing, for each hat that you wear. So you can start offloading those separate things.
No, I haven't written it down. It's just all in my head and probably on the little sticky note, like, okay, you need to look at that. You need to look at that. I know and I realize that I need a social media and a content creator because it gets overwhelmed at times, especially when I'm doing all the paperwork. I need somebody to do that other piece for me.
Sorry, she had to go to the bathroom. What else? What else are we thinking about?
I don't know, this is a random question. So
Yeah.
You must know Kim at Habitat for Humanity. St.
Yeah,
Louis.
uh-huh.
Yeah, okay, so.
I actually bought her and Kevin's old house.
Oh, really?
When they moved, yes. After
Okay,
Kevin's
yeah,
daughter
because
went.
they're down the street from me
Fair-
right
yeah,
now.
uh-huh.
Okay.
Small
Are you
world.
Are you going to the gala tomorrow night then?
No, I cannot. I
Oh.
cannot.
Okay.
I'm going to the Arch Grants Gala tonight, and
Tonight.
tomorrow I want to sleep.
Oh, okay. I have to do both. Okay. But I guess one of my other questions is so when you're, for instance, with community-centric fundraising,
Yeah.
how did you craft your story to get community buy-in in order to achieve the goals that you set out to achieve?
Sure, yeah. So I would say, let me give you a little primer on community-centric fundraising. This is a movement that grew out of a group of people of color fundraisers in Seattle in 2020 that essentially pushes really hard on the ideas of traditional philanthropy and that the way that traditional philanthropy is practiced doesn't actually serve nonprofit organizations, has not shifted our systems to fix problems, and that we need to start thinking about equity and justice and pushing back on those power structures when we are engaging in sort of fundraising and resource development activities. When I started reading about some of these ideas, actually probably back in 2018 or 2019, I was like, this is the kind of work that I want to do. Because as I shared, I was having the opportunity to interact with a lot of organizations, and they all had the same problems, and they were all competing with each other for resources, right? And so I thought to myself, how do we get a collaborative approach, right? And not, we talk about collective impact and things like that, not that, like how do we start to care about other organizations' success and acknowledge that we can't talk about nonprofits doing education work without talking about housing, without talking about economic development, without talking about safety, right? We can't have those conversations. We can't try to figure out how to resource one section of that work without another. So for me, it was, how do we at that time, so back in 2018, how do I get Forward Through Ferguson and National Conference on Community and Justice and Arch City Defenders in a room together to talk about what their work is and what they're trying to do and get them to ask funders for money together, right? Or how do I get MFH, the Missouri Foundation for Health, and Deaconess and Robert Wood Johnson in a room together and say, y'all are all funding the same things for different organizations. What if we tried to do something collaboratively? And so some organizations are like, yeah, let's figure this out. And some are like, you are crazy. We need all the money for ourselves. Why would you suggest that, right? And those people aren't our clients. Those organizations are not our clients. But we have figured out how to have those conversations, how to interrogate power with people who are ready to be pushed and ready to be questioned. And now we have results, right? I can say that, oh, look, we did get Robert Wood Johnson and MFH and Deaconess in a room together, and now St. Louis has its first Racial Healing and Justice Fund. And the decisions made about that money aren't made by those three foundations. It is made by a set of community members who aren't the heads of organizations, who don't hold traditional power, but who have lived experience and know where $1.2 million worth of resources need to go, right? So once we have those proof points, it's easier to start to bring other people along because you don't have to play the game. Like, we choose to play the game because we know how it works and we know what to expect, right? Now we can start to say that when we push on power, some folks are willing to listen and they're willing to come along in the work. I also think, if I'm being honest, in 2020, between the pandemic and George Floyd's murder, there seemed to be like another wave of people being willing to think a little bit bigger about the impact of their work and the impact of their decisions. And so one of the reasons that we had to grow is because we had really focused on serving organizations with a budget of less than $2 million that were led by people of color or women. And all of a sudden, we had organizations like Gateway to Hope and Cortex and St. Louis County Library, St. Louis Public Library, the Pulitzer Arts Foundation coming to us saying, like, we've gotten this wrong and we can't do it anymore. And you're the only firm in St. Louis who is willing to have these hard conversations. And so we also were sort of forced to level up because now there was a demand there for that work. Oh, yes. I think on LinkedIn it's Gladiator RDS. Yeah.
What was the first role that you hired for full time, and how did you know that it was time for that?
The first role, so I hired two people at the same time, actually. I hired, I guess maybe an office manager type role that functioned as an assistant that processed invoices, helped schedule meetings, helped write proposals, things like that. And I also hired a chief of staff because we had, at that point in 2021, amassed like 30 independent contractors that were working in some way or another on like 45 different projects. And that's not my jam. I am not good at it. I'll be the first person to say, like, that logistical piece. I am passion, I am vision, I am like big ideas, and then y'all need go do it. Can't you do it? Why can't you do it? So those were the two pieces that I started with. Thank you. And I will say that I think every organization, every startup at any point should have a person whose job is a chief of staff or logistics type of job. It is a blessing. It is the only reason that we are still on our feet now, because there is a person who is doing all of the coordinating across all of our clients and contractors. Other thoughts, questions, reflections, hopes, dreams, fears, plans for the weekend?
So as somebody who is definitely white privileged, I offer medical services, actually. It's just one-stop shop, me, start to finish.
Yeah.
What are your favorite resources for individuals who need to broaden their spectrum, you know, to do that. I've been in the medical field for a long time, so
Sure.
we all like to think that we don't have biases, but we do.
Oh yeah, you do. Uh-huh.
So what are your favorite resources to discover those and then break through those?
Okay, so a couple things. I think generally, if you've never taken one of Harvard University's implicit bias tests, you should, because we are all biased. They have them set up around race and ethnicity, around age, around gender. There's a couple other ones. And it's very funny to me because we will ask clients to take these evaluations and they're like, this is wrong. And I'm like, no, it's Harvard. It's probably not wrong. They probably did get it right. And so I think that there's that piece. I think that in St. Louis, we have had a number of brilliant institutions and organizations create reports like For the Sake of All, like the Ford through Ferguson report, like some of the information that comes out of East-West Gateway, right? So it is there. We have to decide to read it, and then we have to decide what to do with it. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to participate on a project for the Alliance for Innovation in Maternal Health or something like that, on a patient care package they were creating for hospitals that was focused on cardiac conditions and obstetrics. And they assembled an amazing crew of OBGYNs and maternal fetal medicine specialists. And then they brought me and a Black woman in who had both had postpartum issues happen to us as lived experience experts. And we were compensated for our time just sort of sharing our experiences. And what was fascinating is that you have people who really think that they get it and really think that they understand what women or women of color are experiencing. But until you create space to hear from people that have lived it, you are not going to understand. So if you are able to do something like that and compensate those people for their time, I would really encourage you to think about that as well. Other thoughts, feelings? All right, well, I think I'm going to release you to the demo day thing. Is that happening? What's happening now?
There's another speaker here that will start at 3.
Okay,
But there's other events happening elsewhere.
got it.
Too.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to stick around if anybody wants to have a one-on-one conversation until 3. But thank you for your time today.